Welcome to JS Online Tuitions, and today in accounts we're going to be looking at business transactions. So a business transaction is defined as the exchange of goods and services with a medium of exchange. So a business transaction is the exchange of goods and services with a medium of exchange. The medium of exchange. So the medium of exchange can either be goods, services, or money. So the medium of exchange that can be used, we can have goods, or we can have money, or we can have services. So these are the different types of medium of exchange that can be used. And we know that nowadays the most common medium of exchange that is used is money. So if you want to buy anything in the shop, what you're going to take to the shop, it's money. You're not going to trade the good that you want in that shop with another good that you have, or you're not going to trade the good that you want in the shop or with a service. But what you're going to take money. So money nowadays is the most common used of medium of exchange. And we know that long time ago, goods were the most common medium of exchange, and the goods were used during the barter system. So we're going to look at the barter transaction in details as we go on. We must also know that there are 4 types of business transactions. In these 4 types of business transactions, we have the cash transaction, the credit transaction, the barter transaction, and the bank transaction. So there are 4 types of business transactions. So the first one I've said we have the cash transaction. The other one we have credit transaction. Then we also have the barter transaction. And the bank transaction. So let us look at each type of a business transaction in details. So we're going to start with the cash transaction. So the cash transaction, this is the type of transaction where the exchange of goods and services are paid immediately when the transaction is taking place. So the cash transaction, this is a type of transaction where the exchange of goods and services are paid immediately when the transaction is taking place. Cash transaction can either be paid using money or check. So for the cash transaction, you can either use money or check. Then during this type of transaction, the seller gives the customer either the goods or services, and immediately the customer gives the seller money. An example of a cash transaction is when you pay a bus fee to a conductor when you're on the bus. Another example of a cash transaction is when you buy a new ball and you pay the money immediately. So if you like soccer and you go to the shop and you buy a ball, when you buy the ball and you give that seller cash immediately, that means that the cash transaction has taken place. Then the recording of the cash transaction in the business. Let us look at the recording of the cash transaction in the business. So recording of cash transaction in the business. So cash transactions are recorded in the cash book. So each and every cash transaction that take place, it is recorded in the cash book. So we record all the cash transactions in the cash book. So all cash transactions that involves receiving money in cash form are recorded in the cash column of the cash receipt journal, which is the debit or the left of the cash book. So as we are going to look at the cash book into details, you're going to find that the cash book is made up of two sides. We have the left side, which is the debit side, and we have the right side, which is the credit side. So whenever the business receives money, the amount is recorded on the debit side, and whenever the business pays out money, that amount is going to be recorded on the credit side. So we're going to look at that into details as we look at the cash book. Let us look at the credit transaction. So credit transaction, this is the type of business transaction where goods and services are not paid immediately when the transaction was taking place. So for the credit transaction, this is a type of business transaction where goods and services are not paid immediately when the transaction was taking place. So we can say that credit transaction is the opposite of cash transaction. Since cash transaction, we say this is a type of business transaction where goods and services are paid immediately when the transaction is taking place. But for the credit transaction, here this is a type of business transaction where goods and services are not paid immediately when the transaction is taking place. And for the credit transaction, it involves the customer to pay the money on a later date. So for a credit transaction to take place, the customer must be honest and a regular buyer to the seller. So this is very important. So for a credit transaction to take place, the customer must be honest and must be a regular buyer to the seller. So if we have our customer there, we have our customer A and we have our seller there. You can say seller B. So if this seller B actually sells water, he actually sells water, and customer A is a regular buyer of water from seller B's shop. So seller B owns a shop. So when customer A becomes a regular buyer of water from seller B's shop, sometimes customer A, if he doesn't have cash, he can go to the shop of seller B and get the water on credit. And the reason why customer A can go to the shop of seller B is because customer A is what? Is honest. Because customer A is honest, and the other reason is because customer A is a regular buyer. A regular buyer. Since customer A is honest, that means that customer A is going to pay back the money that is owed to seller B. So let us understand something. So for a credit transaction to take place, the customer must be honest and must be a regular buyer. So if you're not honest and you're not a regular buyer, the credit transaction won't take place. That's simple. Let us now look at the bank transaction. So the bank transaction, this is a type of transaction which occurs between the banks and its customers. So this is a type of transaction which occurs between banks and its customers. So type of transaction which occurs between banks and its customers. So that's the definition of a bank transaction. So the bank provides a lot of services to its customers, like safeguarding their money, giving them advice on business transaction, receiving payment on behalf of its customers, and providing customers with loans and overdraft. So we can say that the bank provides a lot of services to its customers, like safeguarding their money, giving them advice on business transaction, receiving payment on behalf of its customers, and providing customers with loans and overdraft. The customers are therefore required to pay money to the banks in return of the services that are offered by the banks. This is usually regarded as bank charges. So when the bank provider these services that I've said, like safeguarding the customer's money or giving advice on business transaction to the customers, or receiving payment on behalf of the customers, or providing customers with loans and overdraft, the customers are required to pay bank charges to the bank. So that's the bank transaction. Let us look at the barter transaction. So let us look at the barter transaction. So this is the type of transaction where goods are exchanged for goods or a service. So this is the type of transaction where goods are exchanged for goods or a service. So we can say this is the type of transaction where goods are exchanged with goods or a service. So that's the definition of a barter transaction. This is a type of transaction where goods are exchanged with a goods or a service. This type of transaction was commonly used a long time ago when money was not yet introduced. So we must know that the barter transaction, it was used a long time ago when money was not yet introduced. And an example of a barter transaction is in this form. For example, we have Nachirima there. So we have Nachilima, then we also have Sakala. So I've said we have Nachilima and Sakala. So if Nachilima has 50 kg of rice and Sakala has 50 kg of sugar. So we have Nachilima and Sakala. So if Nachilima has 50 kg of rice and Sakala has 50 kg of sugar, and we take that Nachilima wants sugar, then Sakala wants rice, that means that Nachilima and Sakala can trade. So Nachilima can trade rice for sugar, and Sakala can trade sugar for rice. So in the end there, Nachilima is going to give out 50 kg of rice to Sakala. So this is going to come here. So we are going to have rice there. Then the 50 kg of sugar is going to go to Nachilima. So we are going to have sugar. And in that way, the barter transaction will take place. So from our example, we had Nachilima and Sakala. And we said that since Nachilima wants sugar and since Sakala wants rice, these guys can trade. So this is just a simple example. So this is called coincidence of wants. So coincidence of wants is whereby for a barter transaction to be successful, you are supposed to find a person or a business that has what you want and at the same time needs what you have. So this is called double coincidence of wants, a situation difficult to realize. The main reason why the barter transaction has some challenges is because you have to find a person that is willingly to exchange the goods that you have with a suitable person, and that's not easy to find such type of a person. In most cases, you get people who have what you need, but when they don't need what you offer, then which makes the barter transaction difficult to carry out. And I'm going to use the same example for Nachilima and Sakala. For example, Nachilima had 50 kg of rice and Sakala had the same 50 kg of sugar. But let's take for instance that Nachilima wanted the 50 kg of sugar, but Sakala, for example, Sakala needed For example, Sakala needed 50 kg of beans. 50 kg of beans. In that way, these two guys won't trade because they don't have anything in common. So that's the barter transaction. So these are the different types of business transactions. I hope the lesson was interesting, and I hope everything is clear. I'll meet you next time. God bless.